Hello. I don't understand why I have to do this all the time. It's ridiculous. I don't understand why it is I have to do this all the time. And I've used this stream before, and I don't know why the audio wasn't wasn't working. I'm looking at you guys' messages. So I thank you guys for telling me there was no sound. So let's try this again, shall we? Welcome to the program. Of course, I'm your man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me on In the Draft Room Live. We're episode number 3. We're talking wide receivers and tight ends. Got to combine 2 groups tonight because last week we weren't able to do the program due to the NCAA tournament. But this week, NCAA tournament games still going on, but not as many, not as much action. Loyola Chicago, definitely the story of the tournament thus far. And what a game against Nevada tonight. Sister Jean and Loyola Chicago moving on to the Elite Eight. And that's a hell of a story. And it'd be even bigger if they were able to somehow make it to the Final Four. So we'll see what happens there. Nonetheless, I'm a Duke Blue Devils fan. We're hanging in there. We got Syracuse tomorrow night. Looking forward to that matchup. Hopefully we take care of business. I dropped us off in the Elite Eight versus Kansas. So if Kansas takes care of business in the Sweet 16 and Duke does the same, those two will clash. That's where I have Duke bowing out, but I hope I'm wrong. Just like Sister Jean had the Loyola Chicago team bowing out in the Sweet 16, the Ramblers advanced to the Elite Eight. Hopefully I'm wrong about Duke bowing out in the Elite Eight, but you got to get through Syracuse in the Sweet 16 first. But that's another story for another day. I thank you guys for joining me, and I thank you for telling me that there was no sound. So tonight, we're going to combine 2 groups because last week was supposed to be the wide receivers. This week was supposed to be the tight ends. So we're going to put both of the pass-catching groups together and talk both wide receivers and tight ends tonight together. Hey, they're both pass catchers, right? They both have to get the football delivered to them. They both have to catch it and try to make plays afterwards. So why not talk about these groups together? And both of these groups, believe it or not, are groups that we looked at going into the whole process, and we said to ourselves that we thought both of these groups weren't going to be as strong this year. And I'm here to tell you that maybe, just maybe, we were wrong about both of these groups. Maybe they're a little bit better. Now, I will grant you that the tight end position is not as athletic as it was last year. You know, Mike Gesicki may have something to say about that after he blazed the combine. However, this isn't the same type of athletes that we saw last year. Obviously, we had some tremendous athletes at the tight end position. It was ridiculous, and we had multiples, okay? Obviously, the Ole Miss product that was selected in the first round by the New York Giants. You had Njoku out of Miami. You had Everett out of South Alabama, on and on and on and on. And so there were so many talented tight ends that were athletically gifted last year. I don't think that's the case this year with the tight end group, but there's still some good tight ends among the group, and we'll talk about them. And we'll talk about the receivers, especially, you know, me being a big receiver guy myself. I love watching the receivers play and breaking them down. And so I've been able to go through the receivers, and you'll be surprised at what I found. Some of you may not, but I've been banging the drum for DJ Moore. I'm not banging that drum as loud anymore after I've had a chance to really sit down and analyze the tape. Granted, his quarterback situation, his tape was so hard to watch. I felt bad for him. All the different quarterbacks just in this season alone that he went through was ridiculous in itself. But nonetheless, even the things that I saw on tape weren't all that impressive. You know, not as impressive as some of the other guys. So we'll talk about the receiver position in depth tonight. And you may actually walk away with a list of these receivers and where I have them ranked. If you get lucky. I don't know if I'll disclose that information. May make you go to the site for that because I'm going to start putting up my rankings for these players as I break them down on the draft prospects one-on-one series. I've got a ton of content to get out. I just got to get it out. My internet was down the last 2 nights, so I was over here struggling. Your man Louie T was struggling. But back like cook crack, technician came out, got your man right. Here we are, live and in color, talking 2018 NFL Draft. Since the last time we've met, 2 trades have taken place. The Jets have traded from 6 to 3, and the Giants have traded JPP, so maybe they're in the market for a defensive end at number 2. We'll see. In any event, let's talk receivers. The floor is yours. Let's get into the discussion. So, Andrew Kim says, I think Anthony Miller and James Washington are slept on. I'm not sold on Moore and Sutton as much. So let's start there, Andrew. Anthony Miller, believe it or not, right now is my highest rated wide receiver. I know that sounds crazy. I still think, in my heart of hearts, despite the rating that I gave him after I broke down the tape, still think that Calvin Ridley is the best receiver in this draft class. And when you watch the tape, Calvin Ridley played in the SEC, the level of talent there. He had to deal with some quarterback issues of his own, and I still thought that he was a dominant football player at Alabama. Jumped in his freshman season, lit it up. The expectations were set really high. That bar was set really high. He was really never able to meet that level that he set for himself in his freshman season. And that really wasn't through any fault of his own. It was really because of the quarterback situation. So when I look at Calvin Ridley, he's still number 1 despite Anthony Miller having a higher rating. But Miller, for me, he just does everything. And, the size may not be ideal. He's not, Cortland Sutton when it comes to size. He's not DJ Chark in terms of height. But he's everything you look for. He's got everything you look for. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know how fast he's going to run. I've got him pegged after watching the tape. I've got him pegged as a 4.52 guy. It wouldn't shock me if he ran a 4.49. But I've got him pegged as a 4.52 guy. But that doesn't bother me. Even if he runs a 4.54, doesn't bother me at all because he looks to me like Antonio Brown. Yeah, I just said it. And remember, Antonio Brown coming out of Central Michigan ran, a 4.57, I believe it was? And look what he's turned into in the league. And I'm telling you, Anthony Miller looks the part. You turn on the tape, and there's not one thing you don't walk away impressed with Anthony Miller. So, yes, I believe he is slept on. James Washington, I'm coming around, slowly coming around on James Washington. There are limitations to his game. I'll talk about that in the Draft Prospects 101 series. But he's a little bit better than I gave him credit for. And I think he does do some things that some of the other receivers in his draft class, they don't do. And by far and away, I think he's the most physical receiver. We saw that at the Senior Bowl. And so he does bring a different element to the game. I think he does have some limitations. And because of those limitations, I don't think he's a first-round pick. But that notwithstanding, I think this guy is extremely talented. And like you, I think he is very slept on. As for Moore and Sutton, I'm souring on DJ Moore just a little. But again, you have to take into consideration his quarterback situation. I mean, you watch him and you watch DJ Chark and you watch some of these guys who've had less than stellar quarterbacking situations, and you really feel bad for them when you watch the tape because it's really a big hindrance on what they were capable of doing on a game-to-game basis. But Moore has limitations himself, and there are some drop issues from time to time with DJ Moore, and so I'm not as high on him as I was earlier in the process, and that's what going to the tape and watching it and analyzing does for you. It gives you a different perspective. As for Sutton, we know what he is. Okay, he's a big height, weight, speed specimen. He's not going to separate at the next level off of sheer athletic ability. He's going to have to separate because of his size. And I think Mike Mayock made a great point that there used to be 2 ways to separate. One was speed, the other was quickness. Now there's a third way to separate, and that's size. We saw it with Alshon Jeffrey in the Super Bowl, and we've seen it throughout his career, and that's what he's going to have to do. And hopefully he gets with the right team that is able to exploit his talents and use the back shoulder fade because he ran a bunch of stops at La Tech at SMU, and I don't want you to misconstrue that he's not a route runner because he didn't run the complete route tree. I think that's a misconception about Courtland Sutton. But there are, like I said with Washington, some limitations to his game. Quite a few OPIs on tape because he can't separate. And so sometimes he gets a little handsy, wants to push off. And so either you like Courtland Sutton or you don't. Either you're looking for a receiver with size or you're not. But there's a market for him as well. But just because you like Miller and Washington doesn't mean you don't have to like Moore and Sutton. In any event, Vincent Cole says, or let's go back to Gregory Lightbody, who says, what do you think about Equanimeous St. Brown to the Redskins in the fourth? I love his size. I love what he could be. I think the ceiling for him is so high, and much like I talked about with some of these other guys like a DJ Moore, like a DJ Chark, just a really bad situation at the quarterback position really limited what he was capable of at Notre Dame, and I think he's going to get better. And I really like Equanimeous St. Brown, and I think he's a guy that could climb up draft boards because of his height, because of his speed, and because of the potential that he really hasn't truly fully tapped into. I think that there's going to be a run on receivers, and he may be one of those guys that benefits from a run on receivers if it happens sooner rather than later. Vincent Coe says, haven't heard much from Dante Pettis. Can you talk about what round you think he goes in? He brings something that there are a couple of receivers that do bring that special teams element to the forefront and to the table. He was the most dynamic of anybody in this draft in terms of punt return. So that right there, that value is going to go a long way in helping determine where he comes off the board. If you're looking for a guy to boost your special teams unit and also add some wide receiver value, then a Dante Pettis could come off the board in the mid rounds. I don't see him coming off the board any earlier than the third, but I think he's more of a fourth round type of prospect. I don't see him dropping to the fifth because that special teams ability is so great that I think someone's going to pull the trigger on him in the fourth round. But he's going to be a good get for someone because not only is he good on special teams, he's actually not a half bad wide receiver as well. Extreme Archery USA says Crowder is only 3 months older than Ridley. Yeah, Ridley's so young. He's so talented. Sky's the limit for him. At the combine, I think he was just so caught up in wanting to do everything so fast. But the tape doesn't lie. It speaks for itself. The guy is extremely talented and really young. And once the right coaching staff gets their hands on Calvin Ridley, sky's the limit for that guy at the next level. Cloud says, Mike Gesicki has been compared to Zach Ertz and was worked out by the Eagles at his pro day. Do you think he is at play at number 32? Why would you want duplicates? You just signed Ertz to a long-term deal. Ertz is a relatively young player. If you're looking for duplicates, by all means, knock yourself out. I expect Gesicki to be there at 32. I don't think he's a first-round tight end because he doesn't block at all in the run game. I think the first tight end off the board is going to be Hayden Hurst when it's all said and done out of South Carolina. And he's still raw himself, being an ex-baseball player. He's a little bit older, but I still think that that combination of athleticism, which he has, the ability to catch the football, which he has, and the ability to compete and block in the run game, which he has as well, is going to make him a potential first-round pick. But with Gesicki, yes, he is definitely a great athlete. I think he's an even better athlete than Ertz. Ertz isn't the greatest athlete. Ertz knows how to win. That's the great part about Zach Ertz. He's a good athlete, not a great one, but he knows how to win. Just like Jason Witten. Jason Witten hasn't been a good athlete since his days at Tennessee, probably in college. But he's been a consistent winner at the NFL level because he knows how to run routes. He knows how to stem them. He knows how to give that subtle push at the top of a route. He knows how to set guys up, how to stem to the outside because he's breaking inside. He knows how to position his body to separate ball from man. He does everything well, and that's what Zach Ertz does. He breaks guys off. He separates. Zach Ertz has great hands. Mike Gesicki is a better athlete. He can jump higher. He can run faster. But can he do the things that Zach Ertz does, which is separate from man-to-man coverage on a consistent basis and win and be an inviting target to his quarterback. We'll see if he does that at the next level. But Gesicki has everything you're looking for at the tight end position. He just doesn't block at all. They never asked him to do so at Penn State. So that's something he's going to either have to learn or he's going to be a liability, sort of like a Jordan Reed at this next level. Antonio Gates. Guys that just simply never learned how to block throughout their career. Excellent pass catchers, but a liability in the run game. Let's see what else we have. Greg Brewer says, wide receiver is probably the weakest position in this draft. A discussion of this topic is probably only going to be 10 minutes long, 5 for Ridley and 5 for everyone else. I disagree, man. After I went back and watched the tape, there's a reason to get excited about the wide receiver position in this draft. Again, I think you got to get yours if you want it early, because once you get to the mid portion, to the late part of the draft in terms of the receiver position, then you start to see a huge drop-off in talent. But at the top of this draft, I think there is some talent. And if these guys land in the right situation, look out for some of these guys ending up being really good players at the next level. Vincent Coe says, does Darnold's pro day make him the #1 pick? I think we were all goo-goo gaga over Saquon Barkley. And I don't want to go too far off on a tangent because this is receivers and tight ends. But to your point, Sam Darnold had an impressive pro day in the rain today. And by all accounts, the Browns were all over him prior to this pro day. Now they're even more sold on Sam Darnold after the pro day. So I'm hearing that in league circles, it's a foregone conclusion that Sam Darnold's the #1 pick. I'll take it a step further. Matt Miller of the Bleacher Report, who I really hold in high regard, said that if you're going to do a mock draft, start your mock draft at #2 because Sam Darnold is the #1 pick in the draft. Enough said. So that pretty much speaks volumes there. Rodney Ray says, trying to get me fired having this live stream while I'm working this 7 to 7 shift, man. Hey, look, I'm not about getting anybody terminated, man. That's not what I do here. I apologize for having this stream while you're at work. But look, bro, the playback will be there for you, man. So I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble. You know where to find me. You know where to find the stream, bro. Hey, I appreciate you going the extra mile and checking me while you're at work. But if this is something that may get you in trouble, please, by all means, just watch the playback, man. Vincent Coe says, your top tight end draft prospect. So I'm not going to give you any specific order. I'm just going to give you the 5 guys that I think are the best in this draft at this current moment. So you've got Dallas Goedert out of South Dakota State. You've got Mike Gesicki out of Penn State. You've got Mark Andrews out of Oklahoma. You've got Hayden Hurst out of South Carolina. And my last tight end, there are a number of guys. You've got Brenneman out of Massachusetts. You've got the South Carolina. There's another tight end in the SEC that was at the pro. Let me get my pad. The last tight end for me is probably going to be Fumagalli out of Wisconsin, but there are a number of guys that impressed me at the combine. So let me get my list out. But my last guy would be Gesicki for now. But there's some guys that are really intriguing, man. Let's see. Tight end group. Ian Thomas from Indiana was interesting. This Will Dissly guy from Washington, one of the best. I've been told, and I haven't watched tape on him, but I've been told he's one of the best. He's the best blocking tight end in this draft. And I thought he had some really good movement skills, and I thought he caught the football well all day long. So that's a guy that I'm interested in as well. But Fumagalli would round out my top 5. Ian Thomas, Brenneman from Massachusetts, and also that Will Dissly guy is someone to keep an eye on as well. Captain Spartan 04 says, a year from now, can you remind me the name Dante Strickland? He can be something special in the league. I'll try. Don't quote me on that. Moving right along. Andrew Kim says, yeah, my rankings after watching the receivers in this class, my top 5 are Ridley, Miller, Washington, Moore, and Sutton. Kirk just falls out of my top 5, but a mid-round sleeper, Deshaun Hamilton. I'm not a Deshaun Hamilton guy, but to revise your top 5, if I were making the list, my top 5 would look something like Ridley Miller, and again, no specific order here, but Ridley Miller, Kirk. Then I would probably have Sutton and Washington, with Moore tied with Washington or Sutton for that 5th spot. So somewhere in there. But Kirk is definitely in the top 5 for me. Comfortably, I might add. But nonetheless, make sure you use the hashtag LouieTLive if you want your comment to be read on the air. Cloud says, Hayden Hurst was worked out by the Birds too. I said that because we only have Ertz at the tight end position. Obviously, you released a long-time tight end, Jesus, what is his name? Brent Selleck. So you guys may be in the market for a tight end. You may be in the market for another tight end, but to me, Selleck was the one that was the premier run-blocking tight end. You're going to need another one of those. So that's why I don't think a guy like Gesicki necessarily fits what you want to do. To me, and not that Ertz doesn't block, because he does, but he's not the supreme run blocker that Brent Selleck was for you. So I think you're going to need someone to do that, the dirty work. And still, you want a guy that can still go and catch the football. Hayden Hurst would be that guy, but I don't know. He may not be there. You know, we'll see if another team is desperate for tight end help and turns to Hayden Hurst. If not, he could be there for you in the 1st round. Vincent Coe says, any suggestions on the Seahawks drafting a wideout or a tight end? I mean, we lost P. Rich and Luke Wilson. If anything, I think they would be in the receiver market. I don't know if they're going to be in the receiver market early, but I think they will be in the receiver market at some point. No Jermaine Kearse, no P. Rich now. You're getting pretty thin at the receiver position. So, and you did get a receiver in the trade with the Eagles, but again, what are you really getting out of Marcus Johnson? I don't know. So I would think that receiver would be pretty high on the list. Tight end is somewhere in the mix, but I don't think that's something that they'll be pressing for early. You lose Jimmy Graham, though, no Luke Wilson. Maybe tight end is a little bit higher on the list than I'm giving credit for. So we'll see what the Seahawks decide to do. If I were to put one of those needs ahead of the other, you probably would. I would put tight end over receiver because you still have the Angry Bird, Doug Baldwin, out there, and you probably got enough stuff at wide receiver, but you have a really bare cupboard at tight end. So I'd probably say that tight end would come before wide receiver. And a guy that I think would be a good fit in Seattle would be someone like a Troy Fumagalli, and you probably can get him in the mid-rounds. You don't have to go and spend an early round pick on a Troy Fumagalli, and I think he can do everything that you need to have done at the tight end position with Fumagalli. But again, we'll see. Maybe they want a little bit more athletic of a tight end. Dallas Goedert might be the guy for you, but again, we'll see what happens with the Seattle Seahawks. We'll see what they decide to do. Cloud says, also with the signing of Mike Wallace, do you think they're done adding receivers? Personally, I don't think so. I don't know. I look at the receiver position. You got Alshon Jeffrey. Never, ever trust a man with 2 first names. You have Hollins, Mac Hollins. You've got Shelton Gibson from last year's draft. You add Torrey Smith, or not, excuse me, traded Torrey Smith, but you add Mike Wallace. I may be forgetting. Of course, you've still got Nelson Aguilar. That's 5 right there. And I think every single one of those guys I just named, they're making the roster. So maybe you add one more, but I think you might be done. I think you might be done adding receivers. Gregory Fuller says, where do you think Baker Mayfield winds up? I'm thinking Jets. No way. No way the Jets traded up to 3 to draft Baker Mayfield. I think they're in the number 3 slot for one of the 3 quarterbacks named either Donald, Rosen, or Allen. Those are the three guys that I think that are under consideration for the Jets. At number 3, if you wanted Baker Mayfield, there was no reason to trade up to 3. None. I think you could have stayed at 6. And again, I could be wrong, but you could have stayed at 6 and still gotten Baker Mayfield, I think. Unless someone was desperate enough to trade up to number 5 in front of you to get him. No way. You didn't trade up to 3 to draft Baker Mayfield. So where does Mayfield end up? He's going in the first round. I don't think he gets out of the top 15 picks. My guess is somewhere in that 10 to 14 neighborhood. Baker Mayfield's going to go off the board. Wouldn't shock me if it's the Miami Dolphins. I think they're just in a total rebuild, reset button being pushed in Miami, and it wouldn't shock me. But if they're going with this whole culture change, don't you think Baker Mayfield kind of goes against everything that they're trying to build in Miami? So don't know if that's necessarily a good fit from a ideology standpoint, but we'll see. We'll see. Extreme Archery USA says, I feel Jeremy Sprinkle is a great tight end. Don't throw the word great around. Don't do that. Great is a strong word, reserved for few. And I think he can step up. Isn't he a blocking tight end? Yes. Jeremy Sprinkle can block. He can block. So that is something to consider. But he is not a great tight end. Let's not go overboard. He's not even a good tight end at this point. He's a marginal tight end at best right now. Given the opportunity, maybe he can develop into a good tight end. But great, that word is reserved for few in this league. Technically Logic says, where do you have Chark going? DJ Chark is probably the 7th or 8th best receiver in this draft class. I look at DJ Chark, and he's a guy, he ran really fast, and his stock has been steadily rising. But I see some holes and flaws in his game. The Alabama tape was a little damning, a little scary. Did some good things in that game, but the cons far outweigh the pros in that particular game. There were some other things that I saw in this game that I wasn't too thrilled with. But when it's all said and done, I think DJ Chark is a guy that will probably hear his name called late 2nd, early 3rd round if I had to take a stab at it. Gregory Lightbody says, what do you think of Kiki Cutie, finally got to get that name right, Cutie, and Jaleel Scott? Kiki is interesting because he's one of these smaller guys that you can move around as a chess piece, sort of like a Tavon Austin. The Rams couldn't figure out what to do with Tavon Austin, which is why he's going to end up out on the streets looking for work. But if you've got the right system in place and you have a plan of action for a guy like Kiki Cutie, he's a guy that can help. Jaleel Scott, on the other hand, I'm not as familiar with him, so I can't really tell you about him. But I think Kiki Cutie could be a guy that could help somebody, definitely. Him and I think Quandre Henderson, they're in that same kind of mold, that same kind of build. Guys that are shorter stature, quicker than fast, but they can run, and you can put them at running back, jet sweeps, throw them bubble screens, hitches, that sort of thing, and have them change the game there. Visico says Seahawks signed Jerron Brown, but that's it. That's right, you did, and I told you guys in free agency, I really like Jerron Brown. I think he's very underrated. That's why I put the tight end position above, though. I think you've got enough stuff at receiver to go tight end first and then come back and get you a receiver. But I like Jerron Brown a lot, and I think he's going to flourish in Seattle if given the opportunity. Gregory Fuller says, I think my team, the Saints, are going tight end in the first round. Wouldn't shock me. They've been really disappointed, as have I, with Kobe Fleener. And so I think they need a tight end. Drew Brees is starving for a guy that's a difference maker at that position. I thought they were going to go back and get Jimmy Graham again. I'm glad that they didn't. And I think they can find themselves a steal. And if they don't mind their tight end not blocking, a guy like Gesicki makes a lot of sense. But I would go Hayden Hurst if I was the Saints. If you're looking for a guy that can do everything, or even go Dallas Goedert, I think he's the best pure pass-catching tight end in this draft. So if you're looking for a pass-catching threat, Goedert is your man. But if you're looking for an all-around tight end, a guy that can catch it, run, do a little bit of everything, and block, then Hayden Hurst is the guy you're looking for in the first round. Captain Spartan 04 says, I feel like everyone's sleeping on Alan Lazard. I don't like Alan Lazard. I know you're talking about the big frame receiver out of Iowa State. He says, and Marcel Aikman, again, another guy that, yeah, I like him. I don't love him out of Oak State. He was the guy opposite of James Washington. He said they're under the rug. He said they are amazing, but then quickly bring up Moore and Sutton. So he says, so people are like, yeah, oh yeah, those guys are good, and then they just kind of gloss over them and go to Sutton or Moore or somebody else. Look, here's the thing with those guys. They're big body receivers. Aikman a little bit more so than Lazard. I think Aikman can separate, but he's a build-up speed guy. I don't think Marcel Aikman is going to separate from sticky man-to-man coverage. I know Alan Lazard is not. Like I said, though, earlier in the show, with those kind of receivers, you have to have a plan for them. You got to have a quarterback that throws a good back shoulder fade. You got to have a quarterback that can throw the ball up and allow these guys to go and get it. If you got a receiver that can have the wingspan and the catch radius and the size that these guys have, you have to be able to take full advantage. Now, Aikman, unlike Lazard, can take the top off of a defense. Let me see what he ran at the combine. I think I jotted it down in my notes. Marcel Aikman ran a 4.62. Now, you watch him on tape, and he looked like he was running faster, but again, it's the Big 12. That tape makes me sick to my stomach. Watching James Washington run with a bunch of free releases. I know they were playing a ton of cover 3, but god damn it, they were letting him run 80 yards, eat up their cushion. Like, get out of your back pedal. Turn and run. And when they would turn and run, he'd just run a comeback and he'd be open by 12 yards. Big 12 football makes me sick to my stomach defensively. So, while I like James Washington, you got to take it with a grain of salt. He's another guy that I think is going to struggle to separate at the next level. But in any event, I don't like Aikman or Lazard because I don't think they're going to separate consistently at the next level unless they use their size. Clean Senpai says, do you see the Panthers still going receiver Anthony Miller perhaps? Man, I like him a lot, man. And I was banging the table for DJ Moore to the Panthers. Now I'm banging the table for Anthony Miller to the Panthers. He's the perfect receiver for them. Again, the only thing is Cam loves big receivers. He loves big targets because he's a little bit erratic with the football, especially high. Those guys usually make him right. So a guy like Anthony Miller, who is shorter statured, isn't going to be able to climb the ladder and get one of those errant Cam Newton offerings. But I tell you what, man, he could fill that Jericho Cotchery role for you that you had in 2015 and take it to that next level. I mean, way to the next level. This guy has Steve Smith / I think he's more in the Antonio Brown mode, to be honest with you. And I know that's a lot of praise, and I get it. What did he play in, like the AAC? I don't want to blow what he did out of proportion because I got really excited about another I think he played in the either Conference USA or AAC guy last year in Henderson that was drafted by the Carlos Henderson that was drafted by the Broncos. His tape was amazing. Sort of like Anthony Miller's, and we haven't heard anything from him again. You know, he's a rookie last year, so we'll see what happens. But I'm telling you, man, there's something to Anthony Miller, man. There's something to Anthony Miller. Anyway, technically, Logic says, do you have any tight ends in the first round? Yeah, I do. I think Hayden Hurst goes in the first round. It wouldn't shock me if Dallas Goedert went in the first round either. Those are the two tight ends that I think go in the first round. If someone is really, really drinking the Mike Gesicki juice, he could go in the first round. But 2 is the limit for me. I don't see, with all the quarterbacks that are going to go in the first round, we could see 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. There are going to be some good players that don't get selected in the first round because of all the quarterbacks that are going to be taken in the first round. We could see 6 if someone is feeling really froggy and decides to leap at Mason Rudolph. But really, you're going to see 4 for sure. And if Lamar Jackson tickles the fancy of someone and they want to get a 5th year on Lamar Jackson, you could see him sneak into, just like a Teddy Bridgewater did once upon a time when the Vikings traded back into the first round to get that 5th year option on Teddy Bridgewater. You could see someone take a Lamar Jackson in the 5th round of the draft and have 5 quarterbacks go. And if 5 quarterbacks go, you're going to see some players that probably should have been first round picks slip into the second. So the most I see are 2 tight ends. Hayden Hurst and Dallas Goedert going in the first, that is it. But Mike Gesicki, again, with the way he tore the combine up, it would not shock me if someone fell in love with his athleticism. Got a super chat. Going to take care of that here in a second. With his athleticism and his catch ability, and they spend a pick on him in the first round, it wouldn't shock me one bit. Good looking out, Stevie D, on the super chat. He asks, Christian Kirk may slide into the early second. Do you think he will be a great fit in the Raiders offense? The Raiders could definitely use a guy like Christian Kirk. And to me, I've got 3 receivers that are worthy of a first-round pick. Christian Kirk, Anthony Miller, and Calvin Ridley. That is it. Any other receiver goes in the first round, I think you're reaching. But again, someone could be looking for size. Cortland Sutton may be their man. But again, for me, there are 3 first-round wide receivers in this draft, and those guys are Christian Kirk, Anthony Miller, and Ridley. None of them have the size that you're looking for. You know, none of them are 6'3", none of them are 6'2". But they all have great hands. They all can get you yards after the catch. They all can separate. They all go after and attack the football, which you can't say about some of the other receivers in this draft. So I think Christian Kirk could easily be a first-round pick. All someone has to do is fall in love with the ability that he brings. And also remember, he gives you special teams value as well, does Christian Kirk. So when you get a guy like that offers you some special teams value as well, that could also drive his stock up a little bit when you're talking draft. But he'd be a great fit in Oakland. Jordy Nelson is a veteran possession receiver. We've seen the drops from Amari Cooper. We've seen the inconsistency from him. Christian Kirk, I think his best work is going to be in the slot. You don't have a slot receiver right now in Oakland. I know that they don't love what they have in the slot. They traded away Cordero Patterson. I think that Christian Kirk would be a great fit in Oakland. Again, thanks for the super chat, Stevie D. Let's get back up to the rest of the comments. KT the Southern Gent says, who do you see as the most slept-on receiver prospect outside of DJ Moore? You know, the name we don't hear a lot is the guy that we just talked about, Christian Kirk. We don't hear his name. We talk about, all the time, we talk about Calvin Ridley. We talk about Cortland Sutton. We talk about DJ Moore. We conveniently forget about Christian Kirk. I think he's a guy that slept on. But I think the most slept-on receiver that has some talent in this draft is James Washington. We really don't talk about it. And I think it's because of his frame. He's got a running back frame. He's not flashy. He doesn't juke anybody. He's not going to create a ton of space with his route running ability. He played in the Big 12, which, again, makes me vomit in my mouth when I watch defense in the Big 12. But he does a lot of good things on tape. Despite playing in the Big 12, despite running wide open most of the time, despite running past corners in cover 3 defense, the guy's talented, man. And so James Washington, for me, would be the most slept-on wide receiver prospect as we sit here on March the 22nd. KT the Southern Gent also says, who reminds you of Juju Smith-Schuster? I don't know if anybody in this draft class reminds me of Juju Smith-Schuster, because he just brings a different element of toughness. Like, none of these guys that I've watched on tape necessarily are looking to attack. Anthony Miller is the closest you'll get to a guy looking to attack and block in the run game. And Anthony Miller, by the way, tossed up 2 1/4 22 times. Just for anybody that was questioning his strength, this is a guy that, even though he's a smaller stature receiver, he's not messing around. Okay, 22 reps of 2 1/4. That's what tight ends and linemen are supposed to be tossing up. And this is a receiver tossing that up. So he does have an element of physicality to his game, but I don't know if anybody's coming in and ear-holing a safety or a linebacker, cracking down and doing the things that Juju Smith, that element of toughness that he brought to that Steelers offense, sort of like a Hines Ward. I don't know if I've seen a receiver with that kind of toughness in this draft. So I can't say that anybody reminds me of Juju Smith-Schuster. If you're just talking about from a game standpoint, from how their games compare, James Washington kind of plays like him a little bit. But again, Juju Smith-Schuster, you're talking about 6'2", 215. whereas James Washington is 5'11", you know, and I think he might be in that 213, 215 range, but he's not 6'2". So hard to compare him to Juju Smith-Schuster. In any event, Rodney Ray says, I don't see the Redskins drafting any tight end or receiver until the 5th round at the earliest unless Miller is there in the 4th. Miller won't be there in the 4th. I got another super chat of $10. I appreciate that, man. Cliff Thomas, really appreciate the super chat, man. And all he basically said was, appreciate the content, bro. Keep it up. Amen. I appreciate that greatly, Cliff. And I appreciate you watching, and I ask that you continue to do so. But back to Rodney. Anthony Miller won't be there in the 4th round. I can assure you of that. If he's there in the 2nd, he's going to be snatched up. There's no way Anthony Miller is there in the 4th round. And I agree with you. I think the Redskins spend a 1st-round pick on a defender or an elite receiver if a receiver is there that they like. But I think more than likely, with all the quarterbacks going off the board before them, they're going to get an elite defender, and they're going to take that guy. And I think in the 2nd round, I think Doug Williams has made it abundantly clear the Redskins are taking a running back in the 2nd round. So if I had to guess, you don't have a 3rd-round pick as we sit here now. They're trying to get one for Sua Cravens, but I don't know if anybody's going to budge. The Broncos seem to be the most likely destination for him, but I don't think they're trying to move off of a 4th. So the Redskins probably won't have a 3rd-round pick, but you know, you go 4th round, and maybe they'll start to look to address the guard position there. And then you start getting into tight end, wide receiver in the 5th, like you said. So we'll see what happens. Captain Spartan 04 says that South Dakota State tight end going to the Cowboys, calling it now. That's not a bad prediction. That's not a bad landing spot for Dallas Goedert at all. They need a tight end. Jason Witten is on his last legs. Probably should have retired this year, but I think he's going to stick it out for one more year. They're not buck enough in Dallas to push him out the door. But I think Witten understands that this is it for him in 2018. But they're going to look for Witten to maybe mentor a guy that they spend an early round draft pick on. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys pulled the trigger on a young, athletically gifted tight end to replace Jason Witten for the future, because that offense is in desperate need of an upgrade at the tight end position. And Jason Witten's done it so well for such a long time. First ballot Hall of Famer, but it's time to upgrade that position. They tried. They tried it with Bennett. They tried it with the one of the tight ends from, I want to say it was Texas Tech. They drafted the guy out of Baylor last year in the 7th round, or 2 years ago in the 7th round. They've tried, and they just haven't had any success. So we'll see what happens. Gregory Lightbody says, what do you think about Simi Cobbs or Aiden Tate to my Skins? Simi Cobbs is coming off of an injury, and he's another guy that is going to find it really hard at the next level to separate. Auden Tate is an interesting guy because he was an exceptional red zone receiver for Florida State, but outside of that, no production at all for Auden Tate. So it's all in what you're looking for. If you're looking for a guy at 6'5" that can go up and high point the football and get you some touchdowns in the red zone, Auden Tate's your guy. But if you're looking for an all-around receiver, which Jay Gruden has stated numerous times, I want all-around guys, Auden Tate is not what you're looking for. Now, in the case of Simi Cobbs out of Indiana, Simi Cobbs Jr. has some ability, but again, he's going to find it awfully hard to separate. Much like the rest of these, this isn't a draft for big receivers with speed and the ability to separate on their own without using their size. This is a draft with big receivers that aren't athletically gifted from a standpoint of running, and so they're going to have to separate with size. And again, those kinds of receivers are very limited, and generally in this league, those guys find it hard to succeed at a high clip. You got to be able to separate on your own volition. There's some guys that can separate with just pure size in this league, like a Mike Evans, but Mike can also run by you. He proved that at the combine. When everybody was dogging Mike Evans about his speed, he came out and ran like a 4.54, 4.52 at the combine, which pretty much put all of the speed comments to rest. The only guy that right now is winning with just pure size in this league at the receiver position on a consistent basis is Kelvin Benjamin. And you saw what happened to him in Carolina. They got rid of him because, again, After a point, you get tired of guys getting OPIs. He had a ton of offensive pass interference penalties in Carolina. You know why? He can't separate. And after a while, those guys are going to pick up OPIs. So I don't know about those two receivers. We'll see. But those big receivers in this draft, they don't do anything for me because they can't separate on their own. They got to separate with just sheer size. And we're getting bigger corners, and we're getting the ability for corners to be able to defend that back shoulder fade a little bit better. And those bigger receivers get frustrated when they can't separate, and they start using their hands, they start pushing off, and you start getting OPIs. You go to KT the Southern Gent, says, James Washington reminds me of a cross between Devery Henderson and Roddy White. James Washington is not nearly as fast as either one of those receivers. Roddy White and Devery Henderson, especially Henderson. Henderson was a 4-3 guy, and Roddy White was a consistent 4-4 guy throughout his career. Now, from a production standpoint, I can see where you get the Roddy White from. I don't see where Devery Henderson comes into play here because Henderson was a take the top off the defense guy, and that's what James Washington was at Oak State. I don't think he's going to be that at the next level, though. He ran a solid time at the combine, but I just don't see him getting behind guys at that same clip like a Devery Henderson was able to do at the next level. I just don't see that from him, but we'll see what happens. Let's see, where we at? KT the Southern Gent says, which wide receivers draft stock is falling? I don't know if any of them are falling. At one point, Anthony Miller's draft stock was falling, and him not being able to work at the combine may have hurt him. He had a fractured foot, which stopped him from doing anything, but he's going to work out at his pro day. I believe his pro day is, I want to say, late in March, early April. I think it's like March the 29th or something like that. In any event, he's going to do everything in his pro day. I'm anxious to see that 40 time because that's going to go a long way in determining where Anthony Miller is going to fall in this draft. But if I had to say if anyone, I don't know if there's a receiver stock that's necessarily dropping per se. James Washington doesn't seem like he's that hot right now. Miller, I don't know if he's as hot as he should be maybe right now. You know how it is when we get to draft time. What have you done for me lately? We go off of the guys that have performed well in the bowl games. We go off of the guys that performed well in the Senior Bowl. We go off of the guys that performed well at the Combine. But again, the tape speaks for itself. DJ Chark is going up. I can tell you who's going up. DJ Chark is going up. But again, Deshaun Hamilton going up from all of their performances in the Senior Bowl, Combine, that sort of thing. But I don't know if there's anybody actually descending right now. We'll see. Nathan Clark says, which receiver do you think the Cowboys should draft? I'm loving Christian Kirk, and he's a Texas guy, you know, obviously playing at Texas A&M. He's from Arizona, but he went to school at Texas A&M. Look, Christian Kirk is a hell of a receiver. There's been rumbling and grumblings about Dez Bryant not being back, and I still think he's not good. When the season starts, Dez Bryant won't be on that Cowboys roster, and if they're able to get their hands on a big-time receiver in this draft, and a guy like Christian Kirk would fit that description of a big-time receiver, I think you could see Dez Bryant on the outs in Dallas. They're just looking. They're not going to cut him loose until they get their hands on another guy to replace him. And I got another super chat from KT the Southern Gent. 2 hand claps and a Ric Flair. Woo! Love the show, and I appreciate you joining me on all of these streams and you commenting and you just being a loyal viewer to the show, man. I really appreciate that, and thanks for the super chat. But to go back to Nathan Clark, Christian Kirk, again, I think he could fit on any NFL roster. If anybody says, do you think Christian Kirk will fit on my team? Yes. The answer is yes, because Christian Kirk can play in the slot. I don't know if Christian Kirk can play out wide. I think his best position is going to be in the slot, which is the reason why I don't know if he's necessarily a great fit for the Cowboys per se, because they got Cole Beasley, and he wins in the slot consistently, and the Cowboys need another out-wide receiver. If you're going to replace Dez Bryant, you're going to replace him with somebody that you think can win consistently on the outside. I think the Cowboys would be looking more along the lines of a Sutton, a Ridley, maybe a James Washington, one of those types of guys, maybe even an Anthony Miller I think Anthony Miller could play out wide, but his best work might be done in the slot as well, being a more diminutive wide receiver. But I think the Cowboys are looking for someone that can play out on the boundary, be a flanker outside, more so than looking for someone that can play in the slot, which I think Christian Kirk is going to be more of a slot guy at the next level. But again, we will see. Rodney Ray says, I wouldn't mind trying out Tavon Austin as an offensive weapon for a cheap, non-guaranteed contract if he's willing to accept it. To see in the preseason, Alex Smith to Tavon Austin. I like Tavon Austin, and again, you just got to have a game plan for him. I've said that about guys like Austin. Guys like the wide receiver slash running back slash playmaker that the Carolina Panthers drafted last year in the second round, and Curtis Samuel. You got to have a plan for those types of guys. You can't just draft them willy-nilly and then say, all right, what you got? Because they're not those types of players where you just draft them and you insert them. You got to have a plan. And if you got a plan for Tavon Austin, he can hurt you. But if you don't, then you're going to find it hard to get him on the field. They found it hard to get him on the field in Los Angeles with the Rams under Sean McVay. We run a similar offense in Washington. I don't think there's a place in Washington for Tavon Austin. I don't. Not in Jay Gruden's scheme. We rarely run jet sweeps. We got to beg him to get Jamison Crowder the football on the jet sweep. We don't have a lot of misdirection in our offense. Not a lot of moving parts, which is what you want with a Tavon Austin. We're not the Chiefs. We don't maximize the skill set of guys like a Tavon Austin, so I just don't see that happening. Rodney Ray says, you making sure you didn't miss these super chats nowadays. Hey, after you get roasted for missing one, man, I got to be on it, man. That guy was extremely upset at me for missing. And I didn't miss his super chat. It took me a while to get to it, but I've taken you guys' advice, and I'm narrating a little bit better now, so you know how that goes. Rodney Ray says, okay. Appreciate you explaining that to everybody. Juan Jose says, the 49ers are reportedly interested in Courtland Sutton. Do you think there's a chance he will be there at the bottom of the second? They have the Saints number 2. I don't think Sutton will be there at the end of the second round. I think he's going to go early to mid-second round at the latest. I don't think he gets to the – because, again, this is not a strong wide receiver draft class. So I think he'll be one of the first receivers that kind of goes in that run over from the first round that doesn't get selected, because I think you're going to see 2, possibly 3 go in the first round. And the guys that run over from the first round, like a Kirk if he doesn't go, like a James Washington, like a Sutton, like an Anthony Miller, you're going to see those guys. I think you're going to see a run on receivers in the second round. Again, Sutton could go in the first round because someone falls in love with his size and playmaking ability. But to me, there are 3 first-round receivers in this draft. And after that, you're going to see a run on those guys. And I think you, honestly speaking, you may only see 2 go in the first round. And after that, you're going to see a run in the second round. And I think Sutton's going to be a part of that run. So I don't think he gets to the 49ers and that at the back end of the second round. John Perez says, who's the one prospect flying under the radar that can be really good in this league one day? I mean, it's a really big draft pool. I mean, it's hard to say. So many positions, so many players, so many guys that I still haven't gotten to yet. So you got to limit that to a specific position. That's too general of a question to ask at this point. FBG Tony says, the tight ends that fit the Redskins best. Who's the best blocking tight end in the draft? So I've been told it's Will Dissly out of Washington. If that's the case, then can he catch? I saw that he caught it, but he didn't have a lot of production at Washington. That could be because they didn't throw it to him, or could be because the coaching staff knows something that we don't. He looked good at the combine to me. We'll see. But Will Dissly is supposed to be the best blocking tight end in the draft. But if you're looking for a combo of blocking and receiving, again, Hayden Hurst is going to be your best option. Redskins aren't pulling the trigger on a tight end at number 13, and nor should they. So I don't know if you're going to get that combination that you're looking for. You're going to probably have to draft and try to develop someone. The Brenneman kid out of Massachusetts is very interesting. Huge 6'7", 6'8" frame, big guy, similar to the big tight end last year that the Bears selected that everybody was going crazy over, that lit the combine up. He's not as athletic as Brenneman, but a big guy that can block and catch it. And I think he's a guy that could also be a sleeper at the tight end position in this draft. Juan Jose says, any running back receiver hybrids like Curtis Samuel this year? Yeah. Nyheim Hines out of NC State is a guy that comes to mind. He's listed as a running back, but he's a really good receiver. Less of a running back, more of a receiver out of the backfield. So to me, he's one of those guys that he ran really fast. Let me look at my sheet. I think he ran in the 4.3s if I'm not mistaken. Let me see where he ran. He ran a 4.38. So Nyheim Hines at 5'8", 198 can fly. And to me, he's one of those Curtis Samuel types in this draft class. A guy that's like a running back receiver type hybrid that you just got to figure out what you want to do with him once you get him at the next level. FBG Tony says, do you think Calvin Ridley falls to Dallas at number 19? It's possible. It's possible, being that the Bears attack the receiver position. Are the Bears done? Okay, Cam Meredith. I thought they would bring him back for sure. He looks like he's on his way to Indy for at least a meeting. And the way the Colts have been signing guys, I don't know if he makes it out of Indy without a contract. The Bears may not be done at the receiver position, even though they've already went out and signed a couple of receivers in free agency, and Taylor Gabriel and Allen Robinson. They may not be done at the receiver position. Ridley could be a Bear. You know, Ridley could fall to 19, though. It's a very distinct possibility because, like I said, with all the quarterbacks being pushed up, that means talented football players are going to get pushed down. Not to say that Ridley isn't a talented football player, because he is, but that means you're going to see some of these other defensive players that probably should be in the top 10 get pushed down. Sort of like last year, we saw some of the quarterbacks get pushed up. And so the Saints was able to benefit and get a guy like Marshawn Lattimore that should have been a top 10 pick. But because of the quarterbacks being pushed into the top 10, because of Deshaun Watson getting traded up for it, because of Patrick Mahomes getting traded up for it, because of Mitchell Trubisky getting traded up for it, all of a sudden now a guy like Marshawn Lattimore slid down, and voila, you get yourself the defensive rookie of the year and a hell of a football player, and one that you look like could be a stud for you for years to come. That's going to happen this year. The quarterbacks are going to get pushed up. We're going to see 4 quarterbacks go in the top 15 picks, which means a guy like Calvin Ridley could easily slide to number 19 to Dallas. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Technically, Logic says, could Finns draft a receiver to replace Landry? Again, possible. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they draft a quarterback. Again, I don't know what the Dolphins are doing. But remember, the Dolphins also signed 2 receivers in free agency. I highly doubt that they go after a receiver after signing 2 slot guys to replace the slot guy that they lost in Jarvis Landry. They went out and signed Danny Amendola, and they went out and signed Albert Wilson. I don't think they're going after receivers because they still have some young guys that they're looking to develop that they think could help them. Leonte Carew comes to mind. Obviously, Devontae Parker is a guy that they're still waiting on to emerge as the true number 1 threat that they think he can be. But they've got stuff at receiver. I don't think that they're going to attack receiver early in this draft. Not saying that they won't attack it at some point. I just don't see it being a position that they attack with their first-round selection. Cloud says, you eventually think these big body receivers who can't separate and run routes will become outdated in the NFL? No. There's always going to be a place for a big body receiver in the red zone, on 3rd and 5. As long as they're Drew Breeses in the league and these quarterbacks that have perfected the back shoulder fade, as long as there's an Aaron Rodgers, a guy that can throw the back shoulder fade. Like a guy like Kirk Cousins, he doesn't throw a good back shoulder fade. That's not his MO. But as long as there are the Drew Breeses and the Aaron Rodgers and these young quarterbacks coming to the league and they continue to throw the back shoulder fade, there'll be big body receivers in this league. Because, again, if you can separate with your body, there's a place for you in this league. If you can throw a back shoulder fade, these bigger receivers can still win. If you can throw up a jump ball, these big receivers can still win. You better be able to high point. You better not be one of these big receivers that wants to catch the ball with his body. If you got a big frame, you better be able to use it. You better be able to climb the ladder and extend away from your frame and catch the football. Because if you can't, there is no use for you at the next level. You better be, if you can't run and separate with speed or quickness as a big receiver, you better be able to catch it outside your frame. Your catch radius better be large. And that's why Sutton has a chance, because he's got a big catch radius. That's why some of these bigger receivers, Lazard and Aitman, that's why they have a shot. Semi Cobbs Jr., because they have large catch radiuses. John Perez says, what team do you think is the best fit for Minkah Fitzpatrick? Who does he remind you of? Man, he is so big. His stature, I mean, he's not 6'3" big, but he's such a physically built and imposing safety. Man, and he's so versatile. He can come down, play man-to-man over the slot. And he's played corner at Alabama, but even in the same breath, he come down, be a hammer in the box, can play single high. I mean, you can blitz him. He's an exceptional blitzer. I don't know, man. I don't know what the comp is for him. I gotta watch his tape, and I could probably give you a comp for him after I watch his tape. But he's not going to last long. I talked about all the guys getting pushed down in the draft because of these quarterbacks. He won't be one of them. He'll still hear his name in the top 10 of this draft. I assure you of that. He won't make it out of the top 10. There'll be some guys, though, that get pushed down in this draft. I don't think he's one of them. Now, again, everybody can't go in the top 10. It's funny because you listen to everybody this time of the year, and there are 84 first-round picks. 84 of them. Only 32 are getting selected, but there are 82 first-round picks. 19 receivers, 18 running backs, 10 quarterbacks, 6 offensive linemen, all of them going in the first round. 7 defensive linemen / edge rushers, 4 tight ends. You listen to everybody talking, there's 84 first-rounders. There's only 32 guys that are going to be selected in the first round. And in that top 10, can't have 22 top 10 guys. But I firmly believe Minkah Fitzpatrick is going in the top 10 because I think you're going to have 2 edge rushers in Chubb and Davenport. You're going to have 4 quarterbacks, I believe. 3. I won't say 4 because I don't think Baker Mayfield goes in the top 10. You're going to have 3 quarterbacks, 2 pass rushers, 2 linebackers. Okay? I think both Roquan Smith and Edmonds go in the top 10. So that's 2, 2, 3. That's 7. And Minkah Fitzpatrick is 8. And Saquon Barkley is 9. And then there's a wild card spot in there for somebody, I guess. And I could be leaving somebody out. But I think those 9 are locks to go in the top 10. And then I think there's a space in there for a wild card somewhere. In any event, FBG Tony says, I'm not a fan of, where did I go? Here I am. I'm not a fan of this wide receiver class at all. Too many slow-ass receivers, not too many great route runners. Where my 2014 draft class at? F these bums. It's been really rough. We haven't had a draft class and they set the bar really high. That draft class with Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., Kelvin Benjamin, that just came in, set the NFL on fire. The receiver in Pittsburgh, Martavis Bryant, that was just an exceptional draft class in 2014. And we've had a lot of first-round picks just turn out to be duds thus far. Haven't lived up to their draft status. So we'll see if this one can kind of buck that trend. But some people don't love this draft class, and I get it. But I think this draft class could sneak up and be a little bit better than we're giving it credit for. Matthew Lynch says, Skins have Miller and Michael at the second round, who should they get? Or excuse me, Miller and Michelle, Sony Michelle. You got to take the running back. You know, after you went out and got P. Rich, you still believe in Josh Doxson. You still got Jamison Crowder. You still got Maurice Harris. You re-signed Brian Quick. They still got the kid that they like, that they drafted, that I don't personally like, but Robert Davis last year. It's too many receivers. No way they take Miller in the second round. You take Sony Michel and you keep it moving. You take a back. It doesn't necessarily have to be Sony Michel. You just have to get a back in the second round. Excuse me, if you ask me at that point, if you're the Redskins. John Perez says, oh, I forgot to say hello, everyone. Greetings from New Jersey. We got 4 snowy nor'easters in 3 weeks. Yikes. Hey, hang tough in there, man. I'm surprised you got power. Juan Jose says, what's your opinion on the USC receiver Dante Burnett? Is he even out in this draft class? I don't think he's out this year. I think he's got another year at SC. Is he out? If he's out, I missed him. But he's got some quicks to him, man. He's a fast guy. He's not the biggest guy in the world. Got some quicks. Does a lot of good things, but he's not a difference maker, I don't think. He's a complimentary receiver. He's not a number one guy. KT the Southern Gent says, which tight end has that dog in him? Can take over a game? From a pass catching standpoint, I'm assuming you're referencing. Dallas Goedert is that guy. If you're Gesicki and Goedert are those guys. If you're talking from strictly a pass catching standpoint, Goedert number 1, Gesicki number 2. If you're looking for a guy to go and make plays for you in the pass game, Dallas Goedert number 1, Mike Gesicki number 2. Cloud says, I think Kirk can play on the outside. I think his versatility to play in the slot and outside might make his stock rise. Also because he's a special teams returner. I think he might be able to play on the outside. I think his best position, and I didn't say he couldn't play on the outside. I just think his best position is going to be in the slot. Doesn't mean he can't play out wide, but I think teams may try to put him in a box and label him as a slot receiver, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, slot guys, they're among the most important on the offense, especially on third downs. They don't get paid as much money. So if you're looking to distinguish yourself as a guy that can do it all, which you would want to, because the out wide boundary receivers get paid a lot more money than the slot guys do. But the slot guys do all the dirty work. And Christian Kirk, to me, seems like a guy that can do all the dirty work over the middle and win immediately. So I think he's more of a slot. But, again, we'll see. Gregory Lightbody says, what do you think of Terrell Pryor choosing the Jets over Seattle? I think Terrell Pryor needs to go somewhere where expectations won't be high. He didn't. I thought he lost confidence last year in Washington. The expectations were extremely high, and he didn't meet them. And I thought he started to lose confidence. You go to Seattle, expectations are going to go through the roof. They don't have a ton of receivers out there. You're going to be second to Doug Baldwin on that roster. They're going to be looking for you to produce and produce right away in a major way. You go to New York, and they had 2 receivers that damn near caught 1,000 yards last year. They might have had both receivers go over a G last year. So you look at what Robbie Anderson did. You look at what Jermaine Kearse did. And you look at what the Jets are building on offense. You go to New York versus Seattle, you're an afterthought in New York. They've got receivers. They've got stuff. They drafted a couple of receivers last year. They drafted the white guy out of California, who I like, and they drafted the guy out of Alabama, who's a solid possession receiver that can run a little bit. So they got stuff in New York. He'll fit right in. He'll just be another guy, which I think will take the pressure off him and allow him to produce. You put pressure on Pryor, and remember, he hasn't been a receiver for very long. So it makes probably a little bit more sense for him to go somewhere where he won't be counted on as much. Cloud says, hope my birds give him a look. Our special teams took a dip, especially when Sproles got hurt. Plus, he and Aguilar could be mismatches for the slot and outside receiver position. Like I said, Christian Kirk fits on any NFL roster. I said that already. Whether you're looking for a slot or got to play out wide, I think he's more of a slot, but I think Christian Kirk is an exceptional talent. A guy that I don't think is given enough credit for what he can provide for a football team. And that special teams ability does add value and does give him a leg up on some of these other receivers in this draft. Rodney Ray says, Christian Kirk reminds me of a quicker version of Jordan Matthews. Well, Jordan Matthews is a lot bigger. Okay, Matthews is a lot bigger at 6'2", 6'3", not as quick as Christian Kirk. Doesn't have the same ability to win at the stem of a route. Christian Kirk's hands are a lot better than Jordan Matthews. Matthews has been plagued by drops since getting into the NFL. I think Christian Kirk is a different type of receiver than Jordan Matthews is. First name, last name says, could you see Minnesota taking a tight end so Kirk can have more weapons? I don't know what your tight end position looks like. Didn't you guys just draft the tight end out of UTEP? Was it UTEP or the University of San Antonio? Something. He's the second. I know that because he caught a touchdown versus the Redskins last year, and I remember breaking him down. I know he's more of a blocking tight end, but he can catch a little bit. And I know you still have Kyle Rudolph. You may need to go tight end, but I don't know if that's a high priority on the list of things that the Vikings need. But it can never go wrong, getting a tight end in the mid rounds, So I don't think the Vikings need a tight end though, if I were guessing. But we'll see. Cloud says, didn't Brenneman retire from football due to injuries? I remember reading an article that said he would not be in the draft. It's possible. I haven't heard his name mentioned since early in the process. I just knew that I read a lot about him early on. He was a big guy, and he had some abilities, but I haven't heard his name. I didn't hear him at the combine. I haven't heard his name since. So he could be a guy that has retired. That is very possible. Like I said, I haven't heard his name since early on in the process, so it would not shock me in the least if he, in fact, decided to go a different route other than football. RG3 hashtag says, what do you think about Kevin White? Are you referencing the receiver Kevin White for the Bears? If you are, I mean, what are you supposed to think about him at this point? We all loved him coming out of West Virginia. But what has he done since he's gotten in the league other than get hurt every single year? So we all want to see Kevin White win, man. I want to see Kevin White win because I was so high on Kevin White coming out of the draft. I told anybody that would listen he's better than Amari Cooper. He's more raw than Amari Cooper, but he's better than Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper hasn't been a world beater, but Amari Cooper has produced. Kevin White has done nothing but be injured and disappoint. So I just want Kevin White to stay healthy. That's it. At this point, I'm not even looking for a top-notch production out of him. I just want him to play a whole season. Get that under your belt, and then we can start talking. John Perez says, where do you think James Washington lands? I hope he ends up in D.C. with the Redskins. He'd be a great fit. He'd be a tremendous fit because he'd fit that Pierre Garçon role to a T. We still don't have that guy on the roster. We don't have that 3rd and 6. I'm going to throw it to you. I need you to outmuscle the defender and come down with the football. James Washington can do that. We don't have that guy. He's got strong hands. He's physical, not afraid to go over the middle of the football field, but can still, just like Pierre, can still stretch you deep if you sleep. James Washington would be a great fit in D.C., and I'd love for him to be there in the 2nd round to force the Redskins to make a decision. But I don't see the Redskins going receiver over running back, which at this point, I want a running back more so than any other position on offense. So while I would love the idea of James Washington being on our roster, I don't love what it would take for the Redskins to get him. Now, if you trade back and you pick up an extra second in the process and you get a running back and then you got your pick at, our pick still left, then that would be a great get. Receiver, running back, and be done with offense in terms of the skill positions, and then look to bolster the offensive line unless you want to go and get a tight end later on in the draft. But if you're just talking about straight up the Redskins having their pick in the second round, can't see it being James Washington. It's got to be a running back. Cloud says, Minka Fitzpatrick reminds me of Malcolm Jenkins. Yeah, I can see that. Malcolm Jenkins, remember, when he was drafted out of Ohio State, he was initially a corner that got moved to safety. And Fitzpatrick has a lot of those same qualities. Jenkins will come up and hit you, but he can drop over the slot. He can run with all tight ends in the league. Yeah, that's a pretty good comparison. I like that one. I don't necessarily know if Jenkins is a guy that you want as a single high safety. I don't know if he has that kind of range. Fitzpatrick does. That would probably be my only disagreement there. But when you look at the body type, when you look at what the skill set that these guys possess, yeah, that'd be a solid comp. But I think the comp that I've seen to Minka Fitzpatrick, I think Eric Berry was the comp that we were given. And I'm good with that because Eric Berry is today's NFL safety. He's the prototype safety in this league. Can run, can hit, can come down in the box, can blitz, but also can be 40 yards away from the line of scrimmage and be just as comfortable as he is 5 yards away from the line of scrimmage. So I think Eric Berry is the comp to Minka Fitzpatrick. Similar size, similar skill set, ability to run sideline to sideline, be a single high safety, red line to red line. So Gregory Lightbody says, what running back would you like the Redskins to select in the second? I hope Ronald Jones falls there. I'm not actually as high on Ronald Jones as I am some of the other running backs, and you'll see that when we get into the Draft Prospects 101 series. He does, to me, he is a splitting image. I mean, an exact clone of Jamal Charles. If that's what you're looking for, which I wouldn't mind that at all, because he would be that thunder, and he would be like a thunder lightning combination with Samaje Perine, Chris Thompson in that backfield. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I'm looking for somebody that's a little bit bigger and, maybe can make a guy miss or two. He doesn't make anybody miss. He just outruns everybody, which is what Jamal Charles was. Jamal Charles wasn't looking to make anybody miss. He's just outrunning angles. And that's what Jones can do. But we'll see. We'll see. There you go. Mateus says Derwin James is the missing guy in the top 10. There you go. Derwin James. But I can see, I can see Derwin James falling out of the top 10. I think he's one of the guys that when it's all said and done is going to fall out of the top 10, potentially, and allow someone to get a player that they have no business getting. And that's why I'm hoping my Redskins can benefit from all of the parity that could go on in the top 10, because the missing guy in the top 10, I just figured it out. The missing guy is Quentin Nelson. He's going in the top 10. Someone's taking Quentin Nelson in the top 10. So because of that, I think a guy like Derwin James is going to fall out of the top 10. I think he's one of the guys that I was referencing when I said you're going to get some good football players that have no business falling out of the top 10, falling out of the top 10. Ronnie Ray says, what one tight end and receiver in this draft is the most overhyped? Not saying they won't be good, but just overhyped. Also, Redskins, please Derwin James or Vita Vea. James is a 6'3" honey badger. So the one tight end that is overhyped at this point is Mike Gesicki. Now, like you said, doesn't mean he's not going to be good, but when you start talking first-round tight ends, Evan Ingram went in the first round, wasn't much of a blocker, but at least on tape you got to see him block somewhat. Mike Gesicki is split out just about every time he's on the field at Penn State. It is a rarity to see him lined up in a traditional inline blocking tight end stance. It's all but non-existent from his game. And because of that, it makes it so hard to figure out what he is as far as a blocker is concerned. You've got to start from scratch with him as a blocker, I believe. Whereas, at least with Evan Ingram, you could see on tape that he was willing to compete. Maybe not good at it, but he was willing to compete, and you got to see him block on tape in line at times. So, Gesicki is a guy that is athletically gifted, can catch the football. We saw him do some really good things at Penn State. So we know he's fully capable, but I think he's being overhyped because of what he did at the Combine. He's not a great blocker. He's not a blocker at all. And I think some of his passing exploits are being overhyped just a tad because of the athleticism we saw at the Combine. As for the wide receiver position, because this draft class is so underwhelming for most, I don't know if there's really a receiver that's being overhyped. There's one consensus receiver, that guy being Calvin Ridley, and then they're just the rest of the other guys. Like, literally, when you hear anyone talk about the receiver position, it's Calvin Ridley and then everybody else. And then it's your flavor, your cup of tea. You know, who do you like? Maybe you like Cortland Sutton. Maybe you like Christian Kirk. Maybe you like Anthony Miller. Maybe you like James Washington. Who's your flavor? Who's your cup of tea? Everyone's going to be different. And like I said, in this draft, there are a number of positions where there's one definitive guy, and then afterwards you're like, man, it's anybody's guess as to who's the next guy afterwards. And the receiver position is one of those positions. But if I had to say someone was being overhyped, I'd say it'd be Cam Sutton right now. Cortland Sutton. To me, his size, is height, weight, speed, all of that. That's good stuff. But there are a couple of drops on tape. There is a lack of a route tree. I think he still runs routes better than people give him credit for, but there is a lack of a route tree. There is the offensive pass interference that you will see on tape. And there is a lack of being able to separate from sticky man-to-man, which he didn't see a ton of in college, but you know he's going to see a ton of at the next level. So, Clean Senpai says, who do you feel like the Panthers, what do you think the Panthers' draft needs are in order? Looking at that roster right now, I don't know how they feel about their offensive line. Obviously, you lost one of your guards, so that's a position of note. So I don't know if they're going to look to maybe address it still in free agency. There's still some guys out there, or if they're going to look to address that later on in the draft. You look at the cornerback position, not signing Breeland, you still got to hold that corner after you make the trade. And I wasn't a fan of that trade, getting Torrey Smith. I think the Eagles were going to release him anyway. So you could have waited. So you trade away a guy that I thought had some potential at the cornerback position. Now not getting Breeland, that hurts. So I think corner goes to the top of that list. Unless you – and there's not much out there left. So I think cornerback goes to the top of the list as number one. I think you got to find someone that can get to the quarterback off the edge. What Pep did last year was remarkable. You can't assume he's going to do that again. You just can't. So I put pass rusher at 2 because Charles Johnson is done. And to me, he's been done for like 2 or 3 years now. They just made it official this year. But you can't expect Pep to go off like he did last year. You've got nothing coming off the edge, really. So, and I know you drafted the defensive end out of Texas A&M that was opposite of Myles Garrett, Deshaun Hall last year. Deshaun Hall is just a guy. So, to me, edge rusher, corner would be primary needs. Number 1, number 2. You put them in whatever order you like. For me, pass rusher is the chicken or the egg discussion. For me, the pass rusher comes before the corner. So I take the pass rusher because you can make any corner look solid with good rush. Just ask Patrick Robinson last year with the Eagles. You can make any corner look really good with a dominant pass rush. So I go with rusher first, corner second. I don't know. Did you feel the safety position? You lost Kurt Coleman. I'm not a Kurt Coleman fan. You know that. But you don't have anything back there, I don't think. So that may be another position that you may need to fill. I don't think you addressed that in free agency. I could be wrong. But I think there are a number of positions you get to before receiver. You know, you get Torrey Smith. You really like Funches. You got Curtis Samuel coming back. I don't know if receiver is something you look to address right off the bat. Eventually, you have to draft a receiver, though. So I would go edge rusher, corner, and then offensive line / safety. John Perez says, see where we are. Who's the tight end from Penn State? Mike Gesicki is his name. I heard he's supposed to be really good. I heard some call him the next Gronk or Jimmy Graham. Well, Gronk blocks, so he's not the next Gronk. He's got the capability to catch the football like a Graham or a Gronk. But Gronk was a massive man, like damn near 280 pounds. That's not what Gesicki is. He's long like Gronk, though. He's more Graham than Gronk, if we're comparing him to someone. KT, the Southern Gent, says, what round do you see Equinemius St. Brown being selected in? The mid to late rounds. I think he's going to be a 4th or a 5th round pick. Late 4th, early 5th. I don't see him going past the 5th round. I think he's going to go off the board in the 5th round if he's still there early in the 5th round. But I think he's going to be a good get for somebody late 4th, early 5th. Red Sun Batron says, do you think any top safeties could make it to the late 2nd round? I guess you're referencing the Panthers. This is a safety group that, let me look at my list, because you got the 2 Alabama safeties, and they're going to go really fast. They're both going to be 1st round picks. I can assure you of that. Harrison and, of course, Minka Fitzpatrick. But let's get to the safety group, and I'll tell you what's available, what will probably be available. This was a really impressive, from an athletically gifted standpoint, size, combination of size and athleticism. This was probably one of the most impressive safety groups that we've seen. I was actually more impressed with the safety group than I was the cornerback group. But obviously the Troy Apke guy from Penn State lit it up. 6'1", 200 pounds, runs a 4.3, 4.40. Got to put the tape on. But if the tape is just average with that size and speed, you take a flyer on a guy like that. A lot of people are banging the table for this Jesse Bates, the 3rd guy out of Wake Forest. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, and ran a 4.51. If he's as good as advertised, I've heard people mention him in the 1st round. If he doesn't go in the 1st, he'll go in the 2nd. Terrell Edmonds, really interesting guy out of Virginia Tech. He'll definitely be there, I think, in the 2nd round, late 2nd round. Another guy that is intriguing is Dane Cruikshank guy from Arizona. Again, I haven't done my homework on these safeties. I can only go off of what I saw at the combine. 6'1", 209, but he ran 4.42, and he repped 2 1/4, 25 times. He looks the part, man. Boy, does he look good. Oak State has a 6'3", 202 safety in Trey Flowers that ran a 4.45. I mean, these guys are ridiculous. Justin Reed is the brother of Eric Reed, so you know he's an athlete. He's 6 feet, 207, and ran a 4.4 flat. I mean, the amount of athletes in this group are ridiculous. You got Amani Watts, who a lot of people like, made a lot of plays at Texas A&M. He's in this draft class. Jordan Whitehead is another guy that's solid. Marcus Allen is a guy that I think is a sleeper in this draft from Penn State, 6'2", 202 pounds. He's a guy that'll definitely be there, and I think could be a quality pick late in the second round at the safety position. So a lot. Again, it's what are you looking for? You looking for a free? You looking for a strong? That's going to be the question. Free or strong? Obviously, you want a guy that can do both. If you had the option, you want to get a guy that can do both. But as we all know, generally that's not how it works. You got to pick one or the other. So ton of free safeties. We'll see. Juan Jose says, where do you see Antonio Callaway going? He may not even get drafted. You know, when you talk about a guy with all the off-the-field issues that he had, the felony charges, being kicked off of the roster and dismissed from the team, he's talented, no doubt about it, but he chose not to lift at the combine. When you, and you know, Mike Mayock said, look, it's not a big deal, but when you are looking to impress because you've got all of these issues, you're supposed to be doing everything. And I just don't know if he gets it. So where do I see him going? I can't say. If someone takes him, it's going to be late. Like, you don't want to spend a fifth round pick on a guy that could be a troublemaker. That's a seventh round flyer you take. Sixth at the earliest. But I can see him going undrafted. But, you know, talent trumps all. And if someone deems him talented enough, he'll get drafted. John Perez, we just talked about Callaway, and why nobody's talking about him is because of the off-the-field issues. John Perez says, I'd also like the Skins to take a look at Christian Kirk or Cortland Sutton. Again, I just don't see the Redskins being in a position to draft either one of those guys. Cloud says, Derwin is a better safety, in my opinion, than Fitzpatrick. Again, to each its own. You know, everyone's got their own flavor. Everyone's looking for something in particular. You know, certain qualities stand out about one player that may not necessarily stand out with the other. Choose your poison. They're both really good. Clean Senpai says, what receivers do you see being left when the Panthers pick in the second? They're going to be picking late second round. By then, I've got to assume that Ridley, Sutton, Kirk, Miller may be there. I won't put him in that group necessarily. But I got to assume that Ridley, Sutton, Kirk, and I'd say James Washington probably going to be gone by the time the Panthers pick in the 50s in the second round. Washington may be there, but I doubt it. I think there's going to be a run on, like I said, I think there's going to be a run on receivers in the early to mid portion of the second, and you're just going to miss out on a guy like Washington, potentially a guy like Miller and company as well. So who will be there? Let's take a look at the list. Again, you don't want to go reaching just because you need a receiver. There are only a few guys. You know, there are only a handful of guys that I think DJ Chalk will be there. Again, he could be a guy that gets caught up in that run in the mid to early second round that I talked about. But let's see. Deion Kane, DJ Chalk, I think, could be there. Jordan Lasley is a guy that we haven't talked about a lot. I like Jordan Lasley a lot. He's got a little bit of explosiveness to him. He's a little twitchy. But there are drops. That's what concerns me with him. Too many drops on tape for me. And DJ Moore. I think he'll be one of those guys that goes off the board in that rush. So let's go with the assumption that we're talking 7 receivers for the first 2 rounds. Let's just go with the assumption that in the first 2 rounds, 7 receivers are coming off the board. And those receivers are Ridley, Sutton, Kirk, Washington, Miller, Moore, and Chalk. Those are the 7. Let's just assume, for the sake of assumption. I don't think I left anybody out that I wasn't supposed to. So let's just assume that those are the 7 guys. The magnificent 7, we'll call them, that go in the first 2 rounds. At 50, and I don't know exactly where the Panthers are, but Let's just go with 54. I don't know if that's your pick or not. Let's just go with 54. You should be able to get one of those 7 receivers at 54, if you so desire. One of those 7. Now, again, you're not going to get Kirk, you're not going to get Ridley, and you're not going to get Sutton. But the other 4 guys, Washington, Chalk, Moore, Miller, any one of those 4 could be there at 54, or whenever the Panthers select in the second round. Any one of those guys could be there. So just assume one of those guys is there. Do they fit what you want to do offensively, schematically? Do they fit what the Panthers are looking for? That's the question. Do you like that player? Do the Panthers like that player? That's the question. But one of those 7 will be there for the Panthers in the second round. Let's see. Gregory Lightbody says, what time is it? 11. We got 23 minutes left on the stream. That'll be 2 hours. Gregory Lightbody says, I hope we get Jonathan Hankins so we won't have to worry about nose tackle anymore. He left the building without a deal, and if you usually want a guy, you don't let him leave without a deal. So I don't think we're going to get him, but we'll see. Matthew Lynch says, thoughts on DJ Chalk? All right, Chark is an interesting guy. So here's my thoughts on Chalk. All right, Chark is a guy that I love his size at 6'3". I think that he's one of the most dynamic and explosive receivers in this draft. Obviously, by the 4.34 40 he ran, or 4.37. He ran a 4.34 with a 40-inch vert. And you see it on tape. He's running by guys like they standing still. And again, this isn't Big 12 football we're talking about here. This is SEC football. This is big boy football. He's running by guys. Running by safeties, corners, making plays. Excuse me. It's the plays he didn't make in college that sort of scare you a bit. And he loves to catch the football with his body. I noticed that with him. He loves to cradle the football. I want a guy that's showing me strong hands. There's nothing wrong with the occasional using your body to shield the defender and catching the football with your body, but I want the guy that's confident in his hands. When push comes to shove, he's looking to snatch it out of the air with these guys here. These are the winners right here. This is where you make your money at as a receiver. Not this guy. This guy will let you down. These guys shouldn't. So he's a guy that feels very confident in his body and less confident in his hands. He'll catch the football with his hands every now and again. But you watch him catch the football on tape, 70% of his catches are with his body. That's uncomfortable for me. You know, there's not many times you see him extend for a ball. You know, he did against BYU on an outbreaking route. He did against Notre Dame, which was really impressive in a wet game on the sidelines to extend for the football away from his frame a little bit. That was impressive. But you rarely see him do that. And so that kind of scares me a bit. And to me, he's not a great route runner. So I got a love-hate relationship with DJ Chark's game. Because Chark will, in the same game, do something that I absolutely love and then do something that I absolutely can't stand. And so, while I love him in his game, I also have some things that drive me nuts about DJ Chark. So, that's DJ Chark for me in a nutshell. John Perez says, if Darius Geis and Sony Michel are both available at 13, okay, first of all, they will both be available at 13. For the Redskins, which one do you think they will choose? Neither are worthy of the 13th pick overall. Neither. You won't get a second crack at Darius Geis, but you don't spend the 13th pick overall on Darius Geis. He's not worthy of it. Like I said before, someone in this draft on the defensive side of the football will fall because of the quarterback position. Someone will fall. And when they do, a team like the Redskins has to be prepared to pounce. Running back isn't one of those positions that you should be looking to take at 13, unless it's Saquon Barkley, and we all know that's not even a discussion worth having. Sean Stewart says, will the Colts select a receiver in the second or later? I believe they will. They signed Ryan Grant. They allowed their one of their draft picks to walk, and Dante Moncrief, and he walked right across the street to Jacksonville. But looking at the Indianapolis Colts, they are having Cameron Meredith in for a meeting. And like I said, and I did a video on my website, so if you're a Colts fan, I talked about Chris Ballard on the 4-minute offense and how he's revamping that roster. So check that out if you haven't already done so. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so as well. But in any event, he's putting his thumbprint, is Chris Ballard, on his roster. And the trade with the Jets to pick up all of the assets is another sign of him trying to turn his roster over. And yeah, they're going to be looking for wide receiver help. I love the Eric Ebron move. Love the Easy E acquisition for Andrew Luck. And all we can do is cross our fingers and hope and pray that Andrew Luck comes back healthy. But if he does come back healthy, Frank Wright will get a number of targets at his disposal. And they'll have a talented offense because Chris Ballard's got a ton of assets. And with 2 second-round picks now, back-to-back in the second round, as a matter of fact, 30, if I'm not mistaken, it's 36 and 37 in the second round. One of those has to be a receiver. And that's why I think you're going to start to see that run. I remember I've talked all night about a second-round run on receivers. And it may start late first, you know. Ridley may go early in the draft in the mid to late teens. And then after that, you may not see another receiver go off the board until the late to early, late 20s, early 30s. But after that, you could see a run on receivers early second, mid-second. There's going to be a run, I think, where you're going to see 4 or 5 receivers go off the board in a 15 to 20 pick span. So I think the Colts are going to be one of those teams in that mix that takes a receiver. Matthew Lynch says, best route running receiver in this draft. I would have to say that for me, you've got a 3-way go of it. I love what Calvin Ridley does. He's so explosive and twitchy with his route running ability. Like, there are some routes where he just absolutely breaks dudes off. I mean, really leaves dudes at the bus stop, man. Like, hey, your 845 is here, man. A word, and just leave them at the bus stop. Like, there are some moves, just ridiculous. Some of these moves he's putting on these DBs, man. But then in the same breath, Christian Kirk is breaking some dudes off. So is Anthony Miller. I think it's Ridley and Kirk for me are the 2 best route runners in this draft. Those are the guys that I really think are top-notch route runners in this draft. Gregory Lightbody says, do you think Eric Reed is being blackballed? Talked about that on my podcast. You want to hear my thoughts on Eric Reed and whether he's being blackballed or not? Check my podcast out. The latest episode is up. It's a damn good episode, man. So you guys check that out. The Louie T Network podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, and on the site louietnetwork.net. RG3 hashtag says, what should we do with the 4th pick? We all know we're taking Barkley, but the problem is the secondary. You want to fix the secondary, get pressure on the quarterback. Is Barkley there at number 4? I think so, but you never know. What are the Giants going to do? I know they absolutely love Saquon Barkley. Do they have the luxury of passing on quarterback or offensive guard? 2 positions that they desperately need. Do they have the ability to pass on both of those and take a running back? I don't know. We'll see. Cloud says, hello, laughing my ass off, disrespecting my boy Robinson. His best play was in the slot throughout his career, I believe, especially last season. I do agree, pass rush does help the secondary. Hey, no doubt, man. John Perez says, random question here. Should the Panthers have kept Star Lotulelei? They've prepared themselves to allow him to walk. You can't pay everybody. And they put themselves in a position where they continue to draft defensive linemen. And when they drafted Butler, 2 years ago in the first round, that told me everything I need to know about what they were going to do with Star Lotulelei. And when it was time for him to come up, they let him walk. And I knew it was going to happen. Can't pay everybody. And he was one of the guys that just, unfortunately, was a casualty of the position. And they were preparing for that. That's why they drafted Vernon Butler a couple of years ago out of La Tech, because they knew this day was coming. So, yeah, they could afford to let him walk. Cloud says, Justin Reed and Terrell Edmonds are my guys. We need safety depth and starters for the future. And I think you can get those guys in the second, in the third. So there's depth at the safety position in this draft, I believe. Red Sun Patron says, that's what's up. I see why we got rid of Coleman. Thanks, LT. Keep pounding. No doubt, man. None at all. William says, this season... He said, this is the season where we freak out about players with prototypical length and speed that rarely pan out. Raiders used to draft that way based on measurables. Look where that got him. We all know that was the Al Davis way, man. Loved himself a height, weight, speed specimen. You got to get football players, man. It ain't about height, weight, speed no more. And look, with John Gruden there now, you see John Gruden, and I talked about that on my website, louistnetwork.net. That was also the source of a 4-minute offense video, so check that out if you haven't had a chance to do so. A lot of videos on the site, so help yourself to checking that out. Only exclusive on the Louie T Network, so check that stuff out. But in any event, he's turning the clock back, man. Somebody forgot to tell John Gruden that it's not 1999 or it's not 2006, but he's turning the clock back, man. Snatching up fullbacks and tight ends and 17 running backs. He's looking to go back to Bucks ball, so you got to get football players, though, at the end of the day. So it's about getting football players. RG3 hashtag says, how you feel about Deion Kane? Deion Kane, he's grown. His time at Clemson, I think he's grown as a receiver. He's got more growing to do, but I think he has developed. He's developed well over the life of his career into a really solid receiver that I think has the ability to be a Martavis Bryant at the next level. I think he's got that capability. A guy that you get in the mid-rounds, like the third round, like Martavis Bryant was drafted. I think he was drafted in the third or the fourth. Either way, one of those rounds, you get a guy like Deion Kane, and with that speed, he can change the game. Similar to Martavis Bryant, he's got the same kind of size and length as Martavis Bryant. He can run just like Bryant. I think Deion Kane's got that capability. So does DJ Chark. So those are some guys to look out for. All right, let's see. Juan Jose says, are you a fan of Robert Foster? And would you like your Skins to draft him? Don't know who Robert Foster is. So I'd have to do some homework on that guy. And I'm pretty sure after I get through all of my film studies, if he's of note, I'll run across him. And I'll do some film study on him. John Perez says, are the Panthers in need of a defensive tackle with Star Lotulelei gone, or will they try to upgrade the secondary? The secondary's got to be the first primary goal along with defensive. I think they need a pass rusher, personally. But the secondary is right up there. Nope, they're going to take a defensive lineman potentially. But remember, they just went out, and I don't think you've been following the Panthers very closely, but they just went out and signed Dontari Poe. So they've already addressed the void left by Star Lotulelei. So they're not going to address that in the draft. They've already addressed it in free agency. Gregory Lightbody says, do you think the Skins trade down and get that third-round pick back? I don't know if they trade down. If the opportunity presents itself and there's not a player there that they love, maybe that's an option. But they're trying to get that third-round pick back in the form of Stuart Cravens, and they just haven't been able to do it. The Steelers are interested. The Broncos are interested, but they're not interested at a third-round clip. where we're like, look, man, we spent the second round on this dude. We want a third rounder back, or we'll just hold on to him. And that's got to be the mindset that they have is, we'll hold on to him if you don't give us what we want. So we'll see how that goes. Hugo Ball 760 says, who do you see the Chargers taking in the first round? That is interesting. The Chargers, where are they selecting? They almost made the playoffs, so they've got to be in that 17 to 19 range. Those 16 to 19, they've got to be somewhere in that range because they almost made the postseason. So what do I see them attacking at that point? Maybe safety. I'm thinking right now, trying to think of, didn't they draft the safety last year? I believe they drafted a safety last year. So no, take that back. I know that I saw Trey Boston out there quite a bit last year, and he's still a free agent. But they drafted Desmond King last year. I don't know if he's playing safety or not. No, he said he wanted to play corner, but I don't know. You look at that. That's a roster that I gotta kind of examine to kind of figure out what their true needs are, because you got pass rushers with Boza and Ingram. Can never have too many. The linebacker position, I think, is one that maybe you could upgrade. I know you got Denzel Perriman and some other guys out there, but corner might be a position that you look at. All you have out there, because at this point, I've all but given up on Jason Verrett staying healthy. So, and I love Jason Verrett. Man, did I love Jason Verrett coming out of TCU. And I loved him early in his career, but he just never stays healthy. Maybe corner is something that you look to address. I think secondary, and really, with this draft and all the players that I think are going to end up falling because of the quarterbacks, best player available might be the best route to go. Offensive line is always a need in Los Angeles with the Chargers. So you could see them being one of the first teams to take a tackle off the board. That wouldn't shock me. I know you got Pouncey in free agency, so that cleans up a little bit of a need on the offensive line. So we'll see. We'll see what the Chargers decide to do. That's hard because I got to really analyze that roster and see what they do in free agency and see what it is that's a glaring need on that football team. John Perez says, are the Bears in the running for a corner, D lineman, or O lineman? They definitely need D-line help, do the Bears. Their O-line, I think, is fine. I don't know if you need to address that as early, but corner, they got Kyle Fuller back in free agency, so that helps. I think they could use another corner. But D linemen, I think they've whiffed on a number. Will Sutton, they've whiffed on a number of guys up front. Eddie Goldman is the only one that they've hit on. I think they need more pressure on the quarterback, man. They don't get enough. I'd love to see them get somebody in there that can get after the quarterback. That's what I'd like to see the Bears do. Get somebody that can get after the quarterback. And I'd also like to see them upgrade the linebacker position. But first things first, get after the quarterback, man. I don't think they get after the quarterback well enough. Sean Stewart says, Miller, I want Miller with the Colts' third pick in the second. Hopefully you will do a draft 101 prospects video on him. Oh, I will. I definitely will. John Perez says, what's the Titans' biggest need? I think they should either go another linebacker to put next to a Ratpo or a corner to line up opposite of Jackson, the kid they took last year. See, the Titans went out and got a running back, which was a big need because they allowed DeMarco Murray to walk. And they get Deion Lewis in free agency to complement Derrick Henry. So that was a good move there. You look at their team from a defensive standpoint, they're another team that I don't think gets enough pressure on the quarterback. They need interior defensive line help. That's why they were sniffing around Ndamukong Suh. They just cut Sylvester Williams, a big nose tackle. So I think the first primary need for them is addressing the nose tackle position. Remember, they went out in free agency. I think they got a corner in free agency. Didn't they get Malcolm Butler in free agency? So they don't need a corner in free agency. They need a defensive lineman. And I think they're going to look to address that. Daron Payne or a guy like that would probably be a great fit in Tennessee for the Titans with that first-round pick. Everyday Flash says the Cleveland Browns are going to the Super Bowl. 16-0. Yeah, right. Super Bowl Chance 52 says, chances the Eagles take a tight end at 32. Not out of the realm of possibility. I think safety, tight end, all in play for the Eagles at 32. Offensive line, tackle, I think could be in play. And I know Big V stepped up last year. Peters was out, but he's getting up there in age. Lane Johnson, one suspension away from out for, I think, indefinitely at this point. I just think you can never be too safe when you're talking offensive line and you're talking safety, or offensive linemen and tackles especially. So if I had to guess, I'd say that safety and tight end would be the two priorities for the Eagles. Hugo Ball 760 says, maybe the Chargers could pick up a kicker at 17. I think y'all just signed a kicker in free agency, but that was a really bad position for you guys last year. The kicker position was so bad last year. He says, LOL. He says, laugh my ass off. I was joking, but they did finish 31st or 32nd against the run, so I was thinking they could fix that. But maybe they could replace Ferret. They need help up front, stopping the run. I agree. You also need a corner. I think that there are going to be some interesting players available. Much like I mentioned with the Titans, you're going to see a guy like Daron Payne be available, most likely at 16 through 19, wherever the Chargers are in there in that mix. And so, a guy like Vita Vea may be available still, which sounds crazy, but stranger things have happened. No one thought that Jonathan Allen was going to be available for the Redskins at 17 last year. Stranger things have happened. A guy like Vita Vea could fall. So we can see. We will see. But in any event, that's going to do it for your man, Louie T. That's 2 hours. It's been a marathon. And so thank you guys for joining me. Make sure that you continue to support the movement. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Like this video. Share this video. Check out the site, louietnetwork.net. A lot of good stuff up there. Also, there's the podcast. Every Wednesday, there's a new podcast episode up. The Louie T Network podcast is on the site and on Apple Podcasts and on Stitcher. So a number of different ways to be a part of this brand. It's growing, and I want you guys to be a part of it. Remember, if you're making a purchase on Amazon, help a brother out by clicking on the link on the website or a link down below of this and every video that I do. Any of those Amazon links, and then make your purchase. And that will allow me to get a small commission. So, again, a lot of ways we're growing over here, man. And I want you guys to continue to help. Patreon supporters, I haven't forgot about you. I'm lining up some content for you guys as well. So, I want to thank everyone for joining me on the program. Remember, we changing the game over here, period. Draft Prospects 101 series should be in full gear next week. You should start to see videos just boom, 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 because I've got a lot of them lined up I haven't had the time because of the internet going out and March Madness and the website and free agency. Everything's been coming at me so fast. But like a veteran, the game's starting to slow down for me, man. So starting to be able to get my life in order now. And you should start to see that content coming your way very shortly. So thank you for joining me tonight. It's been fun. I'll see you guys next time. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys have a good one. Take care. Louie T.